This is Secular Nation, an official production of the Atheist Alliance of America.
On this episode, we will be talking to Dr. Gleb Tsipursky.
Alright, welcome back to Secular Nation. This is episode 13. We've had a bit of a hiatus. Justin has left the executive director position to focus more on his academic career. In his place, we have CW, who has stepped up as executive director, and he's still our social media director. Mark Gura is still with the organization and working hard to find a new president and increase a lot of our media, so want to keep an eye on that. In lieu of Justin, I have decided to keep on keeping on with the podcast with my new co-host, TJ.
Hello, I'm glad to be here and am honored to join and share my insights.
Well, thank you, TJ. I'm glad you joined as well. If you would like to become a member of the Atheist Alliance of America, you can do so at atheistallianceofamerica.org. If you'd like to donate, you can just put a /donate after that URL and help us to fund what we hope to be a lot of good media in the secular sphere. Be sure to follow us up on our Facebook page, Atheist Alliance of America. And CW also runs Philosophical Atheism and Thinking Rationally, two very active pages that have a lot of great content for atheists, secular-minded people, humanists in general. I'd also like to mention that we should be coming out with some new podcasts. They are in the pipeline. Mark Gura is going to do one focused on his passion, which is secular Buddhism and mindful meditation. I'd like to remind people the show is geared towards keeping an activist mindset in the secular community, and it is of the utmost importance during activism to keep yourself healthy mentally and physically. Meditation does a lot for that. I would highly recommend looking into Mark Gura's work. He's written a couple books on the subject and has a YouTube series on it, I believe. As for me and TJ, you can connect with us on, I am reachable at secularjak@gmail.com. I recently got an official email with the organization, jeremy.casey@atheistallianceofamerica.org, which is a long one, so you can send it to either. You can also reach me on Twitter at SecularJAK, and I have a Facebook page, JAK. They're not filled out, so, go ahead, comment, and friend me, and let's get a discussion going. As for TJ,
if you decide that you want to reach me, you can reach me by email at thehumantj@gmail.com.
It's a good one. At thehumantj.
I am the
Very
human
descriptive. TJ. Please send us anything. You can congratulate TJ on joining the team. You can also, criticize us and tell us that we are missing the point. I don't care. Whatever. Just start the discussion.
I take criticism very well.
Oh, he takes it terribly. But I'm sure the response will be level-headed. Just I'll have to deal with the tears. Either way. We also we're volunteers, guys. Gonna be up front. So we do have our own Patreon page for us as a co-host. I believe we called it the TJK Fund. That may change. I thought it was fun.
I think it's clever, actually.
It doesn't fund much other than us continuing to do the episodes.
Funds TJ and K.
Yeah, it's not like a wildlife fund, but you could totally just put monthly donation, $1 or $2 every episode you listen to. If you want to donate, that'd be very much appreciated. So let's get into it. We left off last episode, teasing that we were going to do an episode on Steve Bannon. It's still in the works. There's just been a lot of stuff that's happened since then. He was booted out of the National Security Council. He has taken a much more shadowy role. Next week, we hope to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty.
Shine that light back on him,
because he's going back to where he's most effective, which is not in the limelight. We're going to, kind of get into his history, the fallout from his CPAC address, which I believe directly led to him getting back into the shadows.
Where he wants to be, anyways.
That's right. But we had a great opportunity this week to speak with a professor of history at Ohio State University who has been doing a lot of great work on the current post-truth generation we're getting into, post-truth political.
Trying to stop it.
We're trying to stop it. So he is doing a lot of great work. We'll talk about the pro-truth pledge, some of his research he's done over the years. We're going to, the talk goes from his upbringing in the Soviet Union right before its collapse. We get into what the current issues with the Trump administration are in terms of post-truth and lying. He specializes in behavioral sciences, so he really wants a functional way in which we can combat it. That will get into the post-truth pledge and some of his long-term goals with intentional insights.
And we also went on to do a little bit of speculation of what might happen if Trump is impeached and we would have to deal with Mike Pence,
who was our governor and is a snake in the grass.
Yes.
He's a very odd person as well.
Oh, yeah.
He calls his wife mother instead of her name.
And this is an individual that could not be worse for any secularist. This is a person who was raised Irish Catholic but then converted to evangelical Christianity and holds those principles. This is a person who denies climate change, says that smoking doesn't kill, declared a protest of the murder of a gay teen in 98. He declared it homosexual propaganda just because people were rightfully mad that this hate crime happened. He uses polarizing rhetoric when it suits him. This is not someone good that we want sitting in the White House. So,
Yep. He's also pushed multiple not very pro-truth positions. I remember distinctly there was a drive to get people to register to vote in an organization in Indianapolis. He sent basically the executive police. I forget the exact faction, but it was at his behest, at the governor's behest, that these people investigate this and then throw out the entire voter registration rolls because there was a question about a couple of them. That was a plan. I don't think they actually got that through, but I just remember Mike Pence sitting there when a woman at a town hall said, what are you doing about all of the illegals voting, all of the voter fraud? And Mike Pence said, it's a very important issue and we have an investigation. An investigation has occurred. We are going to look deeply into this and we are very, very sure that we are going to find something there. I hate him.
Mike Pence
wants to suppress voters.
Yeah, Mike Pence very obviously throughout his career is known for saying and doing what looks good more than what is good or what needs to be done. But we will get into Mike Pence if between now and then you want to read up a little bit on Mike Pence. I suggest a great expose that I found in Rolling Stone that was published in January. But
we'll have that all in the show notes. We're going to have links to all of the Atheist Alliance of America and our personal pages, so be sure to check those out. Without further ado, our guest today holds a PhD in history from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He is currently a tenure-track professor in the history of behavioral sciences at Ohio State University. He is specialized in European and Russian history, peace and diplomacy, power within culture, and the state. His current passion is helping people, organizations, and society at large use science-based decision-making and emotional and social intelligence to avoid disasters caused by poor decisions. That would be much needed now. He speaks to and trains organizations in effective decision-making. He has appeared on TV, news publications, podcasts, and written in many books, including Amazon bestseller Find Your Purpose Using Science. His next book, titled The Alternative to Alternative Facts, Fighting Post-Truth Politics with Behavioral Science, is due out in 2018. He's a lead author and organizer of the Pro-Truth Pledge, a pledge we plan to take after recording this podcast.
All the details.
We encourage everybody, as you will hear, to take this pledge. He and his wife founded the nonprofit organization Intentional Insights, and that has the broader goal of building an altruistic and flourishing world. And without further ado,
we do now have Dr. Gleb Tsipursky on the line.
Hi, Gleb. Thank you for coming on to Secular Nation. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks again for having me on Secular Nation.
It's an honor to have you. You do a lot of work in a very important area now, especially given our current political situation. But before we get into current events, I kind of want to talk a little bit about your upbringing. You were born in the early 80s in Soviet Union, Russia.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's right. Yeah, I was born to a family that was of kind of mixed faith. My dad came from a Jewish background. My mom came from a Christian background. It was never a big thing in my upbringing. The Soviet Union was a secular country, and so it wasn't really a topic of focus. When my parents immigrated to the United States in the early 1990s, my dad got more into a Jewish mode, and he wanted me to participate in that. He took me to a yeshiva, which is a Jewish school, but I just didn't speak to me. I was always skeptical of God and religion and so on. And so I didn't really follow him into his descent into Jewishness.
Yeah, I completely understand that. Same kind of story with my upbringing.
Yeah. And I was really frustrated and sad to see the powerful and even dominant role of religion in American society. And so I became a secular activist from my college days. I basically joined my local Secular Student Alliance Club at New York University and eventually became the president of the club there, which is the Atheists, Agnostics, and Freethinkers Club, and I'm proud to say that it's still going, so I'm happy about that. And yeah, so that's kind of I went into the secular activism realm there, and I've been active in it ever since. So that's kind of secular activism I'm right now. Anyway, I can go into that. But another aspect of my upbringing was that I was always fascinated by why people made the decisions that they did, especially the really stupid decisions, decisions that seemed very irrational, made very on the face of it. Why do you make that decision? That just doesn't make sense. Why would you say that? Why would you do that? So I decided to study the history of behavioral science, which is concerned with how and why people actually make their decisions. There are really great people out there who study and popularize the natural sciences. DeGrasse Tyson, Bill Nye, and so on. Plenty of people. But I was fascinated with the social sciences, with how humans actually operated in this very, how groups made decisions, how individuals made decisions. And that's what I focused on in my research. Specifically decision-making in secular, non-religious contexts. And so I was focused on that. And I got a PhD in history of behavioral science, got a job at Ohio State. And so I'm living here in Columbus as a professor, tenure-track professor at Ohio State. About 3 years ago, I decided to shift my focus from researching this stuff to popularizing the science on behavioral science. So I mentioned Neil deGrasse Tyson and so on. I didn't see other folks doing it. So that's what I decided to focus on. And I founded a nonprofit called Intentional Insights, which popularizes the research and decision-making in everyday life. I did things like researching meaning and purpose from a science-based perspective. I published a pretty popular, well-known book called Find Your Purpose Using Science. And so that was pretty widely read in the secular community, reason-oriented community.
Was it an Amazon bestseller?
Yes. Yep. That was.
That's great. I was definitely going through a bit of your history at OSU. You started a project that was kind of focused on our misrepresentations of Russian youth through the late Soviet Union. I definitely want to. I definitely want to get your opinion on how you feel that misrepresentation and the reality of youth in Russia kind of has, continued down its path to the current relations between America and Russia and their misrepresentations of each culture. Do you think that's played into the current political climate?
I definitely think there is some role there, and I think the broader narrative there is that the Russian government always tried to manipulate its citizenry in various ways. And one of the interesting ways that it tried to manipulate its citizenry, what I studied in my research, was how it used cultural activities, various forms of cultural activities, musical activities, theater activities, to instill ideological narratives into its citizens to be aligned with its ideology. And we can see a lot of that happening right now with Russia trying to use modern technological means, the Russian government using things like troll farms, and this is a very big problem. So what the Russian government does right now is it sets up workers, employees for the government who set up fake social media accounts, fake blogs, and so on, and they go around Russia on various chat forums, various blogs, various websites that are devoted to news, politics, and so on, and they flood the comments. The comment section of each article, they flood with pro-government messages, and they create fake news accounts, fake accounts, social media that look like real people, but they're actually Russian paid, government agents is not the right word, people, just workers who do this sort of stuff, 9 to 5.
So that's not a part of their spy apparatus or anything? That's just normal everyday people they're paying to go on there and troll?
Yeah, it's normal everyday people because, their spies have high level skills. Mm-hmm. They're spies. They don't need spies to do this. They can get the worker off the street who, would otherwise be working in a factory and, or someone who just graduated college and has some techie skills. And they're like, well, hey, you want this job? It pays, better than the large majority of other entry-level positions. And all you have to do is be willing to compromise your morals and ethics. And they're like, sure, why not?
Yeah, when you get a bigger paycheck, that's a bit of an easier decision.
Yep. Yeah, and like in the United States, hey, why not work for a tobacco company and make advertisements for it if it pays me well, right? So that's similar sort of concept. And then Russia it found that these techniques worked really well on manipulating its citizens, which is one reason why Putin has very high ratings. And then it started exporting these techniques abroad, trying to manipulate elections successfully in countries like Ukraine, Finland, Netherlands, the UK. Not always successfully, but always with some impact. For example, with Netherlands, we've got Netherlands to reject a treaty with Ukraine. That was a major role. The Brexit campaign was aided by Russian trolls who used these techniques because definitely Russia wanted to weaken the European Union. And of course, Trump won to a significant extent. That was definitely one reason why Trump won. Without the Russian trolls, he would not have won. So without them supporting his campaign, which is, the kind of stuff that the FBI and the other intelligence agencies have found on Russian trolls supporting Trump's campaign. So that's really unfortunate phenomenon that causes, because people in our society, unfortunately, tend to believe whatever is comfortable to them. And here's where the behavioral science comes in. So the behavioral science on how people think and reason and believe is that most people, unfortunately, are not like you, who are reasonable, reason-oriented people. Most people are not like the listeners of this podcast, who are reason-oriented people who care more about truth than anything else. Most people, they don't really care deeply about what is true. They just believe whatever is comfortable for them to believe, and they're fine. They don't pay really much attention to what is really true. They don't dig down. They just look at the surface level, and whatever seems comfortable and intuitive, they believe. So research shows, for example, that 80% of people can't tell apart on websites sponsored content from real content of the website. So they can't tell apart that stuff. So, if a politician is sponsoring an advertisement on a news channel or a company is sponsoring an advertisement on, people can't tell it apart from the real story.
80%.
80%, yes. This was done specifically with the Slate website, where they had pretty tech-savvy people who are kind of high school students, college students, middle high school students, look at the Slate website and they couldn't tell apart the sponsored content from the real stories.
Well, that is frightening. So, that's terrifying. Do you think...
Yeah, that's terrifying, yes.
Yeah.
So that's why the American population has been so susceptible to the Russian trolls, to the Russian techniques, the Russian trolling. They work because people are not discerning and they don't care to invest the time and the resources that you and I and the large majority of your listeners, I'm guessing, invest into actually ensuring that they believe the true things as opposed to the lies and the
right. But
and that's the area that I'm focusing on a lot of work, how to change people's beliefs so that how to effectively change people, how to effectively change our society in such a way that people will actually believe the truth and care about the truth. That's one, for ordinary people. Second, how do you change our society so that public figures like politicians, journalists, authors, celebrities, podcast show hosts, radio show hosts, and so on are committed to telling the truth as opposed to lying? Because right now they don't have incentive to tell the truth, especially politicians.
Well,
so that's been the focus of my work.
Well, we've talked a little bit about how Russia uses the truth versus perception conflict to manipulate. But do you see those same kind of tactics being used with Trump as he influences our culture?
So Trump is benefiting from what Russia is doing. He may or may not be directly colluding with it. So that's why we have an investigation going on to investigate whether he is or he isn't. So hopefully there will be, hopefully the current the person leading the investigation won't be fired like the previous one.
No.
And, let's cross
Let's
our
hope. Well, that would truly be Nixonian at that point. Because Nixon never fired the FBI director, but definitely got rid of the special prosecutor.
Exactly. So that, it can definitely happen. So that's a thing. Now, the other thing is that Trump has definitely used similar tactics. So he has his staff are on the record as using voter suppression tactics. For example, they have created videos of Hillary Clinton saying that Hillary Clinton believes that African Americans are super predators and targeting them at African American voters and in key strategic swing states in order to drive down voter turnout for Hillary Clinton. And they've done a lot of other things with key strategic groups. So they have done similar tactics. They've used similar strategies, and you know why? They work. Nothing's like success, right? So if you are unscrupulous and you are willing to lie to people and deceive people, and if you know that 80% of the people can't tell apart sponsored content from paid content, then why not use paid Facebook posts to bring this material to people? Because, people don't really check their Facebook very carefully. If they see a sponsored post on Facebook and believe it's a post from their friends, which most people would tend to do, they would see like, oh, Hillary Clinton is a super predator, and one of my friends shared this on Facebook, instead of realizing that it's the Trump campaign, which is targeting them personally, sharing that on Facebook. And they, of course, would tend to believe this.
Right.
So,
and those seem to be common tactics among Republicans in general. I know they put billboards up with people in jail cells that say voter fraud is a felony right by a poll place. I mean, they have a long history of that, and I find it sickening.
It is quite unfortunate. So that's what we're focused on changing and what we're focused on stopping. And that's what we're working on with the Pro-Truth movement, which we're launching. And the focus of that is the Pro-Truth Pledge. That's protruthpledge.org. To get people, ordinary citizens, and public figures to commit to telling the truth and making sure that we hold them accountable for when they lie.
Well, here's a question, if you allow me to speculate for just a moment. Let's say the truth comes out about Russiagate. Trump pays the ultimate price with impeachment. Now, he, despite everything that has gone on, still has the base that is just following him no matter what. How do we get that base to see the truth past their blind support for this president?
How do we get them to trust the Pro-Truth Pledge?
So, this is a good question. One of the things that we're focusing on is not aiming at the most fervent Trump supporters. We're not. That's not the focus. When Hillary Clinton said that half of Trump supporters are in the deplorables basket, I mean, she apologized, but it wasn't that much of an exaggeration in terms of, there are plenty of people among Trump supporters who just aren't reachable. And that's okay. I'll be honest, there are liberals some of the liberals are just as irrational as conservatives. Not as many according to, evaluations and statistics and polls, but there are plenty. So how do we get to Trump supporters? Well, we get to the ones who are reachable. There are plenty of people who voted for Trump holding their nose. Trump has huge unfavorable ratings. Huge, as he would say. So there are plenty of those unfavorable ratings that come from Republicans, that come from people who voted for him. They don't like many aspects of what he does. So what we need to do is get to the people who are reachable. I'll give you an example. We had a person who was a pro-truth pledge advocate, volunteer for the pro-truth pledge, go to a Rotary Club. Now, a Rotary Club, for those folks who don't know, is a pretty Christian and patriotic and conservative institution. So every meeting of a Rotary Club begins with a prayer. I nearly choked when I first gave my presentation to a Rotary Club when I figured that out. And it begins also with the Pledge of Allegiance, with, the under God in there, which, because I was giving a presentation, I stood and, I skipped that part to the under God part. But, obviously didn't pray. So it's a conservative institution, and so it's conservative leaning. It's made up of business professionals. And this was in a conservative district in Hilliard, Ohio, if anyone cares to check it out. It's a well-known, it's under Steve Stivers, conservative Republican. So, congressperson. So she went there, she gave a presentation on the pro-truth pledge, and, 25% of the membership signed up. So this was of conservatives. Okay. 25% of the membership. So they're definitely reachable. There are plenty of people who are reachable. Now imagine that, let's say the representative there, Steve Stivers, goes to give a presentation at the Rotary Clubs, which they often do, because that's a major way of getting money. The Hilliard Club people are often the central, community pillars. Basically, they have a lot of money and influence. So if he doesn't sign the pro-truth pledge, which I doubt he will, but then and they sign the pro-truth pledge, and they see that he didn't sign the pro-truth pledge, how likely are they just to support him? Maybe they won't go out to vote for him, but they definitely will contribute less money to him. So that's the way that you undercut the support of these people. You get ordinary Republicans as well as Democrats to take the pro-truth pledge. And the first step is for all people who care about truth to take the pro-truth pledge. We need to get the early adopters in there, and we need to get advocates of the pro-truth pledge. You know how this woman went there? I knew her. She was a personal kind of contact of mine in the professional world. She is a small business owner. I talked to her about the pro-truth pledge, person to person. She was like, yeah, this sounds like a really good idea. I'll take it. And, she's liberal, so she's kind of, comfortable, but she's religious. So, I didn't talk about the religious stuff. I talked about, the progressive stuff, truth-oriented stuff, reason-oriented stuff. And then, since she's a small business, I'm a professor. She's a small business owner. She's just like the people at the Rotary Club. So she was able to go to the Rotary Club and appeal to them from a perspective of, not being a professor, but of being a person just like them and appealing to their values. Also from a religious perspective, quoting things like the Bible, the truth shall set you free and stuff like that. She was able to do that. So it's by networks, and she was able to reach those people. So it's by getting these early adopters, it's by getting everyone who cares about the truth to go to protruthpledge.org and take the pledge right now, that we can get the movement going. We can start with a snowball, and we can end up with an avalanche, but only if we make it happen.
Okay. I've heard you talk about this concept on many other podcasts, The Scathing Atheist. You had a discussion where they were talking kind of about getting mayors and the local elected officials so that as they go through the political pipeline, they have taken the pledge, get them early.
That's definitely one of the this is one of the things we focus on. So, for example, we're approaching local politicians to get them to take the pro-truth pledge. We're also approaching candidates for elections. They have much less to lose by taking the pro-truth pledge than already elected officials. And so we find that candidates are much easier to encourage to take the pro-truth pledge than people who already occupy office. So local officials and candidates are really good political targets among politicians for the pro-truth pledge.
Okay.
Among other public figures, journalists are good targets. Radio show, podcast hosts, bloggers are good targets because basically it gives them a reward, credibility among their audience. They took the pro-truth pledge. We have a number of podcast hosts who are right now starting their shows by saying that they took the pro-truth pledge and they are committed to being truthful in every aspect of their podcast and to asking their audience to hold them accountable if they're not. That just gives the podcast host a greater credibility than another one who doesn't do that. And so, and also any politician, any public figure, including podcast hosts, has a chance to write up a paragraph about why they took the pro-truth pledge and links to their podcast or, campaign page or so on. And that gets sent around in a monthly newsletter to all pro-truth pledge advocates, or to all people who signed up for the pro-truth pledge. So that gives them more support, whether it's more listeners, more readers, depending on whatnot, or more voters and fans for politicians.
All right, point taken, Gleb. We'll take the pledge, and we'll definitely put it in the podcast. But I definitely want to get into. I've been thinking about the kickback from this because I believe it's a great idea, and you can get the momentum. But I'm just thinking of the knockback. So you recently put out some articles about the liberal response to Gianforte, putting conservatives all in a block. I feel like liberals will probably be the ones to more likely do this in the beginning, progressive versus Democratic primaries. You can definitely get into Republican primaries, and I like the strategy with candidates, but I just fear that it might become a lopsided, politically weighted thing. How do we kind of approach it in a way that minimizes that possibility?
So we are talking strategically about this too within the organizers, and that's a good point. What we are aiming to do is that whenever we go to candidates in a race, we make sure to ask all candidates in a specific race to take the all major candidates to take the pro-truth pledge before we publicize. So, for example, here in Ohio, we have the two Democratic candidates who are running for Ohio's Congressional District 12, which is the district that I live in. They both took the pro-truth pledge. Now we're going to officially, meet with the Republican current office holder and ask him to take the pro-truth pledge. And then wait and, to give him an opportunity for like a month or so and then release a press release about whether, saying that they all three took the pro-truth pledge or the two Democrats did and the Republican didn't after being given a month to think about it. So that gives you, that's pretty clear and nonpartisan. Everyone is given an opportunity. Some people decided to do it, some people decided not. It's up to them, not forcing anybody's hand. This is an opt-in opportunity. And, you can raise questions about why the Republican didn't. And you can do the same thing in the case that, we approach Democrat office holder and Republican candidate takes the pro-truth pledge and Democratic office holder doesn't. We can raise the same sort of questions.
Okay. So shame.
There are plenty of Democrats.
Kind of get a social detriment to them having not taken the pledge, and if they do take the pledge and they're held accountable, obviously this is a growing organization. Where do you see in the next couple years that accountability engine? I think that's going to be very important to keeping people to the pro-truth pledge and giving it the credibility it needs to be kind of weaponize it in a way that fixes some of the faults in society.
Absolutely. So the credibility in the pro-truth pledge, we have a pretty clear monitoring mechanism. And so if somebody says something that's false, somebody can say something false by mistake. I can say, right now that 2 + 2 is 5. I'm not sure why I would say it, but let's say I do. Something that's an obvious mistake. And I say, you tell me, oh, hey, what was that about? And I'm like, oh, sorry, I retract that. Of course, it's 4. So it's easy. Anyone can violate the pledge by making a statement that's false. But most people who make statements that are false are not deliberately trying to lie. They're not trying to deliberately deceive. They're just making mistakes, and that's fine. people retract their statements. We're very comfortable with that. We celebrate people who update their beliefs. That's one of the tenets of the pledge. We welcome flip-flopping. We want to set up a culture where people flip-flop, where people, when they learn new information that influences their thinking, that they actually can change their minds. That's good. We want that.
Right.
So
right.
we welcome flip-flopping. We welcome updates. Now, the problem comes if somebody states something false and then refuses to retract her statement. So let's say, again that Ted Tiberi, the congressional guy, the Republican, takes the pro-truth pledge and then states something false. Something, let's say, climate change is not happening. Human-caused climate change is not happening. Then we privately go to Tiberi and ask him to, hey, what's up? What's the situation? If he still refuses to retract the statements, we investigate the situation. We give him several more opportunities to retract the statements. And finally, if he still refuses to retract it, he gets several opportunities. There's no gotcha game. It's all about, private behind the doors so that people aren't threatened. That's kind of, a major thing that we found in focus group research with politicians. We want to do things behind closed doors before taking things public. Now, finally, if after several attempts he doesn't retract his words, that's when we would go public. We'd issue a media advisory to all the media in his district, and we'd send action alerts by email or text, whatever the person signed up for, to all the people in his district who signed up for the pro-truth pledge, asking them to tweet him, email him, write him, call him, meet with him, protest his office, and so on, write letters to the editor about him being in contempt of the pro-truth pledge. That's different from violation. Violation anyone can do. Contempt is when we see the evidence that this person is deliberately lied and is not retracting his word.
Okay.
And then so that's kind of a serious punishment, serious educational punishment.
It's a much more level-headed approach than social media pile-ons immediately in the aftermath of a single mistake.
Absolutely. We want people who make a mistake, that's fine. We ask people who, there are a certain group of volunteers who volunteer for the role of evaluating and monitoring these public figures. We ask them to approach them quietly behind closed doors and try to resolve things themselves. If they can't, they go to a mediating committee composed of vetted pro-truth pledge volunteers who evaluate the situation. And that's where that's where it scales up, goes to the next level. Okay. And that committee takes a while to investigate. So there's no gotcha game. It's very clear, very transparent process. We then would send all the information to the relevant media channels and so on. Okay. And we've already had it. It never went to the stage, but of actually polluting someone contempt of the pledge. But we had a congressperson in Ohio, congressman was not a candidate for Congress in Idaho, who took the pro-truth pledge, and he posted some tweets on his Facebook wall about Trump mistreating or saying something critical about minority children or disabled children. And then the tweet was questioned, and you couldn't find it in Trump's Twitter feed, so maybe Trump deleted it, but, maybe Trump never posted it, and it's just Photoshop to make, Trump look bad. So he issued a retraction saying that, hey, he edited his Facebook post saying, because of this pro-truth pledge, because of this pledge for truth that I took, I am editing this post to say I'm not sure whether this tweet is real or not. So he made a clear statement that, retracting his original statement that this is a real tweet. So that shows you already that it's impactful and it's changing people's behavior.
So basically, there's no gotcha game unless you're not willing to take personal responsibility.
Yeah, even in that case, it's not gotcha. It's like, here's a transparent process that we go through. There's absolutely no gotcha. There's, clear information at every level about what's going on.
Okay.
So,
I like that. I definitely disagree when, an airline, somebody goes on an airline, makes a joke that's perceived as racist in a tweet, and by the time they get off, they're fired from their job with no explanation and they were asleep.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember that.
And too often nowadays things get quoted out of context and people want to pile on before we know what that context is. And it's nice to have a process to clear things like that up.
Mm-hmm. So that's what we're trying to do.
How do you respond to the current culture we're in where, like, let's say Trump gets impeached and Pence is president. You know, Trump's an obvious liar, but Pence is more of a snake in the grass. He was the governor of our state and has a long history of just lying for personal gain. He goes to his Christian roots to basically cover the fact that he denies climate science. He denies basic science about the age of the Earth. It's much more classic game of denial. I just feel like there's quite a bit of this population that's just not going to care about post-truth. And I don't know if they're small enough that the mass majority holding to this pledge, respecting it, are going to actually be able to push back. What are the strategies in a possible Pence presidency or somebody after Donald Trump who's more of a conservative Christian classic person that kind of gets us into our same old ways? What's the best way to try to hold them to account? Because there's a lot of religious truths that are just not true.
Sure. There are a number of aspects of the pledge that would be problematic for them. For one of these aspects is that they need to abide by the scientific consensus because science is their best way of knowing the truth. So for things like climate change, human-caused climate change, there's a strong scientific consensus that there's human-caused significant climate change. If Pence doesn't agree with that, he'd be in automatic violation of the pledge. He can't even sign it. If, so would many other people. People who believe that homosexual, conversion therapy works would not be able to sign the pledge because the scientific consensus that it doesn't work. So that's where we address things with the power of the scientific consensus. That people, it's a pro-truth pledge, and an important aspect of this pledge is that it's also a pro-science pledge. Truth is bigger than, I would say the truth is bigger than science in this specific context because it also applies to fact-checking websites and obvious lies that science just doesn't deal with. But it also applies to science. So in this case, a lot of the religious things, policies would go against science, and that would be covered by the pro-science aspect of the pro-truth. Okay.
So the population that denies science outright and they're still voters, well, I know you do a lot of work with behavioral science. You talk on both sides about how they have self-defeating strategies of persuasion. They're coming from different realms. What's your... I'm from Indiana. Let's say I'm talking to somebody at the grocery store who is a diehard Trump supporter. Throw some casual racism out there. Do I walk away and try to convince somebody in their sphere that has more weight? Or do I have strategies myself that can address those issues in the moment?
So I would say that your best efforts should be devoted to in two situations. One is where you know that a person is able to be convinced. So one thing that I've found quite helpful is using the pro-truth pledge as a filter. So seeing if a conservative person would be willing to take the pro-truth pledge and abide by its tenets. And then, if that person engages in argument strategies that go against the pro-truth pledge, you can clearly point that out and have helpful conversations about it. So that's kind of for ordinary people. I would generally not spend time on people who are blowhards, who just engage in things like shifting the goalposts and just, would essentially ignore valid points that you make, because why spend your time with them? I mean, unless you're doing it for your own entertainment, that's just fine. But don't expect to change their mind.
Right. Well, I'm just thinking of a lot of those people who, they get their truths from their pastor.
If you're trying to actually get people to change, that's one thing. If they get their truths from their pastor.
But does the pastor able to have the post-truth pledge, even though?
Yes, so the pastor is able to have the post-truth pledge. We do have pastors who have taken the pro-truth pledge because we have specific specific elements where we clearly say the pro-truth pledge only applies to statements made in the public sphere. In the same way that, if my wife asks me if she looks fat in that dress, I am going to say, no, honey, whatever I personally think.
Violation, tweet storm at you, Gleb.
Exactly. So, in the same way the pastor, can say, oh, yes, sure, God exists. To the extent that, in, private kind of context, in ways that aren't relevant to public life. Now, if a pastor says, God appeared to me and said that all Americans need to have the right to own bazookas, then that's a statement that applies to public life, and that's where we'd want to see some proof that God did indeed appear to him and say that the burning bush told him that all Americans need to own bazookas. So the pro-truth pledge again only applies to statements made about public life, and not statements that are kind of in private context or kind of irrelevant to like gossip around celebrities. We're not going to care about that. That's meaningless. Whatever. They can go gossip whatever. If whatever the latest celebrity, Lady Gaga, I don't know the current celebrity, Lady Gaga, let's say, takes the pro-truth pledge and then wants to say, I'm the best music queen ever, I'm not going to care about checking her statement on that or something like that.
So Kanye can take the pro-truth pledge and still go on stage and tell Taylor Swift to let him finish, or he's going to let her finish, and that Beyonce was the best music star of all time. That's not a violation? Or she did the best music video of that year, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if Kanye actually tries to run for the Democratic nomination, which he has rumored to be considering, then he takes the pro-truth pledge, then he would need to watch what he's saying about the public sphere.
Now, does this cover public displays too? Because hypocrisy is rife, and people can say one thing, and then, the whole actions speak louder than words concept.
Oh, yeah, it would apply to their words. If they say science is awesome, but then they push for legislation that basically says, religion, whatever, that's religion focused, that would be applicable to that. That, why are you pushing for this legislation if you actually believe in science? How does that square? And so that would be a question that's asked. Absolutely.
Well,
it's also.
I was just saying
also would be.
I was just going to say we're getting close to time on the interview, and I kind of wanted just to let you get into a little bit about your parent organization over the Pro-Truth Pledge, Intentional Insights, that you started with your wife. Just want a little bit more about the kind of long-term goals there.
Yes, so the long-term goals is to essentially reshape our world in the same way that we're trying to reshape truth in politics, is to reshape our world to be more rational and make better decisions in all areas of life, not only politics. Politics is our biggest focus. We're focusing about 3/4 of our energy on it, but because we think it's the biggest area of work that is most damaging to our society right now. That's why we need to focus on it right now. But hopefully, once we get this pro-truth pledge going and get other people working on it and focused on it, we will we are working on other areas. So we are working on people making decisions in business, in relationships. We had that earlier work on meaning and purpose and long-term goals. So we want to work on all areas of life and helping people make better decisions everywhere. And it's a 501c3 nonprofit, and we welcome donations, we welcome volunteers, and the website for that is intentionalinsights.org. Okay. And again, want everyone to go to protruthpledge.org. That's our current biggest area of focus. We think politics is the biggest problem in our society, and the lack of truth, the deceit, the rampant lies are the biggest problem in politics, and that's what we need to solve. And we're having some success. And I hope that all of your listeners will join us.
I completely agree, Gleb, and I encourage all of our listeners to take the Pro-Truth Pledge. What would be the most effective place to donate to the cause?
If they go to intentionalinsights.org/donate, or just on the website, they'll see that there's a donate button. They can just click on that. So that all of the money will go to causes, like I said, 3/4 of our work is on the pro-truth pledge. So that's where things will be going.
Okay.
And I hope everyone chooses to take the pro-truth pledge. Another good way to both donate and proclaim your support for the pro-truth pledge is get some of the awesome merchandise that our volunteers created for the pro-truth pledge. It's going to be on protruthpledge.org/merchandise. It's just going to be a button, the merchandise button on the top window on the top bar. So I encourage you to get that. Wear your pride. Show your support for the
Definitely.
Well, thank you for providing us your insights, and I hope that your success continues.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Oh, it was an honor, Gleb. You're doing good work, so I hope you keep it up, and I'm glad to see some rational voices out there.
Thank you, and I'm glad that you two are taking the pro-truth pledge as well.
That was a great talk with Gleb. We encourage all of our listeners to take the pro-truth pledge. I believe we said post-truth a couple times. It was pro-truth every time.
But the correct website will most certainly be in the show notes, so check that out and take the pledge as we have done.
Yep, and the show notes are going to have links to a bunch of resources. Gleb's, he's trying to make this organization go, so I'm sure you'll see this in the news more and more. Please send us any articles you see. Let us know if you took the pro-truth pledge. We'd love to see how the community takes this and hopefully go somewhere that actually holds politicians accountable.
Now, don't forget we still have in the pipeworks a little bit of a Steve Bannon expose. We don't want to forget about that shadowy power in the White House. But with all that's going on in the world as quickly as things are happening, I'm sure we'll never run out of things to talk about on Secular Nation.
Until religion is destroyed and everybody's a free thinker.
I'm down with the free thinking.
That's the wink plan, right, guys?
Well, thank you for joining us.
See you next week.